I do not believe that our Western problem started with Descartes. Now, I'm going to give you 2 words. Just, you don't need definition, but just keep those to the minimum. Rationalism is the epistemology. In other words, you didn't want to hear that. I wish you hadn't heard it. Some negative word. Epistemology is the theory of knowledge, how one knows anything. If that's news to you, I can't even apologize because I'm sorry for you. I just feel so badly. I might just spend the rest of the 4 hours that I've got tonight crying. Rationalism says that the human mind, knowledge, has its origin and validation in the mind. Origin and validation in the mind. Now, being rational is not the same thing as rationalism. Any ISM, any English specialist been to the Harvard or Yale or Chicago in English and can parse a sentence, and you can use the computer and get 20 pages for your paper and can't parse a sentence, can you do that? Hopefully you can. But any ISM phoneme, you know, is that too much? It's bedtime, I know that. ISM phoneme is a clue to a worldview in the English lexicon. Liberal is to be set free. From what? Liberalism is a worldview. It comes to science, I can't count it. Conservative means to conserve something. So that's a derogatory term. You know how that goes, so no need to argue that with you. But conservatism is a viewpoint. Any ISM phoneme, modern, modernism, postmodern, and postmodernism, these are not synonyms. It's in the lexicon. Postmodern has been in the lexicon since the 1980s. Now, it's been coming a long time, but that's something else. It started with Kant's perspectivism. We'll say a few words in algebra tomorrow about that. Now, Kant's perspectivism, you know that giant, he was trying to unify rationalism and empiricism. I didn't tell you what empiricism was, give you these things. Maybe give you a migraine before you go to bed at night. You have to start popping up again. You just lay down. Your wife says, "What's wrong with you?" You say, "Well, I'm comatose. I went to this weird guy. I got a migraine just in a little while. I haven't had a migraine in months." Empiricism says that all knowledge has its origin and justification in experience. You hear this word? Well, see, empiricism produces skepticism and despair. Because empiricism is always open-ended. Science is not, it's empirical, but it isn't empiricism. Because anytime you're doing theoretical analysis of things, that is not something you see. We don't look out and see the universe. We don't look out and see light. We don't look out and see the periodic chart. We don't look out and see DNA particles. But they're there. We extrapolate. Now, that's the difference between empiricism and what science is. Just very simple, because some of you are scientists and you went to MIT and Oxford and Cambridge on this, so I'm not here to tell you anything. But empiricism, science is not, it's empirical, but it is not grounded epistemologically in empiricism. And rational, everybody is rational. Everybody in every system and every language, whether it's the Watusis or the Animists or the Hindus or the Buddhists, any system that they live in their language is what to them? To them. Is rational. Yes, of course. And when they can start building computers and build billion-dollar airplanes with metallurgical equations, I will listen to them. What's wrong with their worldviews? They can live as long as they're, the cultural anthropologists talk about cages. Is that? I wish I had never heard of that. That's 2 words you wish. A cage is just, we're locked in there. Now, if everyone's locked in their cage, linguistic and cultural cage, you can't do what? But the number one, except for yourself. You're not just sharing massive ignorance. But you can't get out of the cage. See, that we'll say a few words. Wittgenstein's language game says everybody's locked in their own language. Now, I can't help it that Wittgenstein shaped the last 50 years of Western thought. It's not my fault. Now, if that's a problem to you, well, you take it a little bit. He's already found out about God. But anyway, Wittgenstein, he talks about the language game. Every language is its own game. And you can't cross-culturally communicate. Well, if you can't, what about the commission? I always want to come back to the final commission. He sent us to all this trouble. I didn't send you to the trouble. He sent us. I never speak about you. I speak about us. We're riding first class with a Titanic. All of us in the same boat. Not just you, not just me. So I never use first person about anything. Now this, I wanted to tell you this, you forget anything else, all of this. 6th grade teacher, she told, that was before the Pope was elected. And that he's too conservative. You know, he's bad. But anyway, she, 6th grade, she said, now in a few days, that was before he was selected, she said, in a few days, the cardinals are going to elect a new Pope. And after about 10 seconds of deafening silence, this young boy raised his hand and said, what about the Cubs? Don't they ever take them? You leave it out the Cubs, you leave it out there. Well, he misunderstood. Well, anyway. We are in a very complex world. And that can be very frustrating, and all of us would have a tendency to do what? Withdraw into our comfort zone. I mean, that's psychologically understandable. But we can't remain in our very limited comfort zone and carry out the Lord's commission. Whatever the commission entails educationally, how much education do you need? What do you want to do? If you want to be a custodial chaplain in church or a nursing home, well, you don't need to do certain things. If you want to take on the world, then I'll tell you what you need to do. But if you just want to live in a limited cage, it's not just the relativistic cultural anthropology talks about cage. I think our brotherhood's in one large cage. Yeah, I said that. And that's us. I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about us. This is too serious to be limited to us. Anyway, only in the Bible, don't forget that if you forget everything else. Only in the Bible, not the Sumerian, Babylonian, nobody in the Semitic world, nobody in the Greco-Roman world, matter was eternal in everybody's worldview around the world. Matter, only in Genesis 1:1 is it affirmed to have a finite origin in time and space. Only. I can't help that. And we need Christians that are committed to Jesus Christ, that are high-level astrophysicists. And I know fewer than a dozen of those. But they know what's going on. Well, I said, you ought to be able to create a revival in the church. School desperately need to get out of the impasse. Well, astrophysics is about the structure of reality. I didn't create the DNA particle. I didn't create the chromosome molecule. I didn't create these things, but they're there. They're not so at the heart of relativism in our culture that I'll labor tomorrow afternoon. Cultural relativism is technically called the sociology of knowledge thesis. You've heard or haven't heard. Sociology of knowledge thesis says that all knowledge is bound in the social linguistic structure of adherence. Well, science would collapse if that's true. You would never get from Aristotle to Newton or Newton to Einstein if you're locked in a cage, because they came in cages. You never have any scientific advancement if everybody is necessary. See, it is true that we are in a cage. It is true that we all come that way in the language, upgrade, genetic environment. That's trivial. You don't bring that up past high school camp. But the issue is, if we're bound necessarily in that, we can't get out. And no one else can get out. That's where the so-called relativism. See, the new Pope, I said there was no hope for the Pope, but there's some hope for that man. He's 78 years old. I think the Catholic Church made him Pope because he wouldn't last too long. And they figured he's too conservative. He's not open. He's not gracious. He's not loving man. He's too cerebral. He's too academic. But he's 78. They're praying. They're in Mass right now in Rome, praying Well, he won't last more than a year or two, so he can't cause too much trouble. And then we'll put it somebody else. No, they don't know what hit them when they got Ratzinger. You probably won't really mind in the Roman Catholic power against the present time. But they're not listening to that, see? There is how cute and how nice he is. And he isn't nice, and he's not, he's like me, he's had a beauty deprivation. He doesn't have a whole lot of that, so it's not marketable. Well, anyway, truth. That fool wrote a doctoral thesis on relativism.